Hello and welcome. My name is Kelsey and this channel is a place where I share my experience with creativity. This is episode 2 in a series where I'm sharing the process of making myself a handmade wardrobe in the year leading up to my 40th birthday next April. I've got some fun things to share, but I wanted to take a quick minute to say thank you to everybody who watched and engaged with my last video. I wasn't sure what to expect when posting a YouTube video, but was happily surprised to see the project resonate with so many people. I had more fun than I thought I would just making and editing the video, and ultimately saw it as another way to be creative. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who watched and engaged with the content. I have spent some time thinking about how to structure these updates, and what I've come up with so far is basically 4 segments. So the first will be an overview of the 4 weeks, what I got up to, any overall reflections on the project, and my inspiration for the project. I also thought this would be a nice time to talk about any comments that came up in previous videos that were good topics for discussion. I'll then cover a knitting update, a sewing update, and then the last section will be an overview, what I'm calling the big picture, which is where we circle back on the original goals of the project and just chat about the progress and a summary of items I've made so far and how they all work together to form a wardrobe and any sort of gaps in that wardrobe, and just looking forward to future project ideas. So let's get started. So overall, the last 4 weeks, I was pretty inspired by this project. I had lots of energy to knit and sew. I took about a week to order fabric and yarn, and it took about another week to come. So that was a bit of a learning point for me, in that I sort of had to have some projects coming down the pipeline in order to meet the 3 to 4 week posting goal for these videos. But in the meantime, I did get into my fabric stash, and I pulled out any fabrics that looked interesting or that I felt inspired by, and I actually made one project in this video from my stash, and I pulled out a few items for future plans. During this time, I was still working part-time as an accountant, so I worked 3 days a week, just part days. And I also received a fairly large wholesale order for pottery. So I typically do pottery 1 to 2 days a week, and was pretty busy with that during the last few weeks. But even with those 2 commitments in my life, I still have a fair bit of capacity to work on this project. I went to a Fibre festival locally called, I believe it was called the 100 Mile Fibre Festival, and I purchased 2 new yarns there. I don't usually buy yarns in person. I prefer to purchase online, just because I usually find a project and order the related yarn, and I tend to have more success ordering online, whereas in person I tend to make impulsive purchases, and I don't love having a lot of things in my stash. So I thought I would share the yarn that I purchased at the Fibre Festival. So I got 2 different yarns. I got 3 skeins of this and 2 skeins of this, and both of them were from a maker called Simply Fibre by Nicole. I believe she's based out of the Victoria area on Vancouver Island, and I'm planning to make, this is just like a thicker, fluffy, cozy yarn, and I'm planning to make kind of a cropped sweater. So I have bought 3 skeins of it, so hoping for kind of like a mock neck cropped sweater out of this one. And I'm not sure what I'll do with this, but this one's hand dyed and this one's hand spun, and it's just like a variety of different fibers that she's mixed together. But I don't know, I just kind of thought they looked pretty together, and I guess that's kind of one comment I have about buying yarn in person is, if I'm at an event with a group of people and it feels fun, I feel pretty good about buying a specialty product like this, just because I think I'll really remember the day, and isn't something necessarily that I would order online. So this is kind of exciting, but I don't think I'll get into these until fall, just because of the color palette. I also made a trip to Victoria, and I went to a yarn shop called Beehive and a little sewing store called the Sewing Club. I had been to Beehive before, but I hadn't been to the Sewing Club yet. And the sewing club was like a really sweet, like a small but intentional collection of fabric, notions, patterns. And I believe they also do workshops and printing, pattern printing there. It was like a really fun little shop, and I didn't buy anything on this trip. I had just ordered my fabric and yarn online, but I did purchase some notions and a few tote bags and project bags to carry knitting projects. So one of the questions that came up a few times on my last video was just balance. How do I balance my creative projects but also life commitments? And so I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit. By design, I do have a fair bit of time and space in my life to be creative for projects just like this one. And I did previously work full-time as an accountant, but during those years of my life, I never felt like I had enough time to create, and I was always more inspired by projects that I had going on outside of work. And I always just believed like if I could just get more time and space to be creative, I would be so much happier. And turns out that wasn't the solution either. I did end up quitting my job about 5 years ago around the time of COVID and started making pottery full-time. And it just like wasn't long before I burnt myself out on that. I'd kind of taken the energy from full-time work and just applied it to pottery, and that wasn't the right fit for me either. So now I'm just at a stage where I'm stepping back a bit to figure out what I want to do. So I don't know that I have the whole balance thing figured out, but I do know at this time in my life I have a lot of space and time to create, and that was pretty intentional. Yeah, so I'm focused on just listening to my body and just following inspiration when it strikes. So what do I feel excited about doing? And then just following that. That's part of what makes your response to my first video feel really special. I didn't overthink making that video. It was an idea, and I felt inspired, and I did it, and just receiving such a kind welcome online just felt like a little sign from the universe that I was on the right track. So I just recently started working in accounting again, so picked up 3 days a week, and I've actually found this is quite a nice balance. So I'm doing 3 half days of accounting and pottery when it feels fun for customers that I enjoy working with, and then the rest of the time I take on projects like the one that I'm working on now. Again, I don't feel like I have that all figured out, and it's still a work in progress, but I did want to share a couple tips and ideas I had on this topic. So the first one is a timer trick that I use, and I use this anytime I have like a full day or a block of a few hours to create. And what I've found is when you have a full day to create, if I create all day, I tend not to feel that great either. So I neglect like basic things like the dishes or eating or walking the dogs, and it's not like the healthiest for me to get so fixated on projects. So I generally block the time, and I'll just set a timer for, doesn't really matter how long, but let's say I would do half an hour, and I might just sit and knit for half an hour, and then I set the timer for 30 minutes again, and I do some chores, or I make myself lunch, or I might have a shower and wash my hair, or do some laundry, or take the dogs out for a short walk. And I kind of structure these big chunks of time like that, just so that I am actually like getting life duties done, not just creative projects. And on the topic of using a timer, when I worked full-time, I did find that even just 15 to 30 minutes a day working on a project, you could actually get a lot done. And I would set the timer for 15 minutes, and I know I'm not going to make a t-shirt in 15 minutes, but I might be able to like get my machines out, or thread my serger, or put thread on my bobbin, or cut out the pattern, just little chunks. And this all might come easy to some of you, but for me, it didn't. And I often felt kind of overwhelmed about how I would complete projects, but just knowing that even a short amount of time every day actually ends up yielding some pretty good results. And the last thing I wanted to say, if you are a creative person but you don't have a lot of capacity in your life to create, just not to be hard on yourself, because the last thing you want to do is beat yourself up for not getting creative work done when you don't have time and space for it. So I would just ask if you could make any small shifts in your life that would result in more capacity and more space to be creative or take on projects that you're interested in, just to self-reflect on that. And sometimes that means saying no to things that you want to do. I personally find myself on the spectrum of energy to be kind of on the lower end, so that this is something I've had to do over the last few years, is just really think about what's important to me, what I want to achieve, or not even achieve might not be the right word, but how I want to spend the time and what's going to be like the most fulfilling for me, and just focus on that. And sometimes that means passing on other things that you might want to do. I think it's definitely like an interesting topic, and sometimes it's hard to just see people online who have a lot of time to create and seem to be producing a lot. And I just wanted to be transparent that I am at a point in my life right now that I have a lot of time to create, and I'm taking advantage of it. And if anyone has any comments or tips on that topic, just opening it up to leave a comment on this video would be great. Okay, let's talk about knitting. So the first thing I want to talk about is socks. I did purchase myself the Chiagu, I think they're like mini twists, just like the tiny little 9-inch circular needles to do socks. I didn't feel great about buying like a whole bunch of sizes of DPNs, and I don't know, magic loop has always felt a bit awkward to me, so I thought this might be a good way. And to be honest, these needles did feel pretty awkward at first, but over time I was able to kind of get my hands in a different position from when I'm using bigger needles and get into a state of flow with them. As I had said, I waited for yarn for a couple weeks, so I did go to a local store and buy some yarn. It was a green yarn and it had mohair in it. I'll be sure to put the name on the screen. And I did start a free sock pattern from Ravelry, and I quickly aborted the project. The sock pattern was probably fine, but I think I didn't enjoy using the mohair yarn. So it just didn't feel right, and I had ordered some yarn that I was feeling more excited about, so I set that aside for now. I did purchase this book by Summer Lee, and the first section of it just talks about different ways to make socks and different constructions, different ways to do the heel, which I found quite helpful as a beginner. And I think she uses circulars, so recommends that. And I chose to proceed with a pair of ribbed socks from this book. And the yarn that I used was something I purchased from the Knitting Loft in Toronto, and it's actually their Knitting Loft brand sock yarn. I think they call it Boots. And it's this really soft sage green color. And I made one sock. The second sock is in progress. I think I just finished the heel gusset. So it's coming along. I think she calls it the size medium, but I actually fit more into what she recommends for the size large. So it's a tiny bit too small. I wear a size 8, but it's just like a titch too small. So I will finish these socks like this, and I'll try wearing them, and perhaps they'll shape to my feet. But I think next time I make them, I will make them a little bit bigger. One other thing I wanted to say about this yarn, and kind of part of why I chose it, is because I think it has like 60 different colors. So if it is a yarn I like to use, I like the idea that they sell full skeins, but also mini skeins in like a huge variety of colors. So I liked it so far. I wouldn't say knitting socks is my most favorite thing. I do want to compile just a little list of tips and beginner patterns that people left in the comments, and I'll try and put that on the screen now. Yeah, people left some really great feedback, so I thought I'd share that in this video. Yeah, so that's the socks. And I also ordered some yarn to make the Olga sweater. So I ordered the Knitting for Olive cotton merino in the color wheat. I chose not to do the stripes on the Olga sweater, and I've gotten started on that. I'm just a couple inches below, kind of joining in the round, and this has been pretty uneventful. It's working up quite nicely, and I'm interested to see how the cotton merino washes and holds up over time. One comment I would make, and this is not specific to this pattern, but anytime I pick up on the shoulder and I try and get make it look like it's invisible, I don't really love it because it isn't actually invisible. And I think it was the Petite Knit Cloud sweater where she did 2 rows of pearls there and actually made it more of a design feature instead of trying to make it invisible. And I keep saying I'm going to do that and then I don't, but I really think I should do it on my next drop shoulder project. But yeah, that's the Olga sweater, so that's part of that first outfit if you watched my first video. I'm making the size medium. Yeah, that's that. And I did finish my Camisole number 10 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and this I had started in my last video. It's the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the color cream. I made the size medium, but as I had mentioned, I found the armholes just like a little bit too deep. So I made the size medium basically up until here, and then I did one less decrease kind of on each side. So more like a small from here down, I guess. So the armhole's not as deep and the shirt is not as wide. But this has been a lovely item. As I had said, I'd made it in another color, so I kind of knew what to expect with this, and I've already been able to wear it a little bit this year. It still feels a little bit too cool. I think I would need a layering piece to wear this comfortably right now, but yeah, I'm quite happy I've created that. And I did start another one of those cami number 10s in the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the color powder. I did mention this in my last video that I have purchased a few colors, and I got started on it while I was waiting for the new yarn to come, and the new yarn came and this got set aside, so it'll get worked on here and there. I have a camping trip planned for a week in the next few weeks, so I think I will have a lot of time to knit and not a lot of time to sew, and my goal is to hopefully wrap up these 3 projects, so the socks, the Olga sweater, and this tank. Okay, let's chat about sewing. So one thing I wanted to cover was printed patterns. So I choose to do the A0 printing at my local print shop, and in previous years I would have just cut that paper right out, but I decided to order some tracing paper, which I will link below, and instead of cutting the actual pattern out, I lay tracing paper on top and I trace out my size and just cut that out instead. So that leaves the printed version intact. So if I want to make it again in the future, that makes it easier to switch size, or if I'm needing to make any modifications to the pattern. And that's nothing new, it's just new to me. And I thought it's been a nice sort of addition to my practices. So the first thing I made when I was waiting for my fabric and yarn to come was the Lane Pants by Sydney Graham. And I used a fabric from my stash that is just kind of a lightweight linen twill, very casual. This is baggy elastic waistband pant, wide leg pant, with the option for cargo pants and a drawstring waist, which obviously I did. When I first made these, I made them in a size 8. I originally thought they were way too big and wished I had made the size 6, but then proceeded to wear the pants every single day. I've worn them every day since I made them. I walk the dogs in them, I work in the garden in them, I lounge around the house in them, I'm going to work in them. They've just been a great staple, and I have almost forgotten about jeans since making them. So I do think it's a sign that I need to make more loose, flowy drawstring or elastic waist bottoms. I didn't make any modifications, And if I were to make them again, the only thing I would do, and perhaps this is already in her pattern and I just missed it, is I would have stay stitched the upper edge of the pant patterns, which is just a really short stitch length stitch around in the seam allowance to add structure while you're adding pockets to the patterns or adding the cargo pockets, because I did find when it came time to attach the pant legs to the waistband, the fabric I had chosen had relaxed quite a bit. So that's one thing I would do. And then the second thing I would do is, I don't love the serged edge here, and I'm sure it would be better if I used a different color serging thread, but I don't have serging thread for a bunch of different colors, so it doesn't affect the way that the pants look and are worn. But I think if I were to make them again, I might encase that maybe in a binding, or I would try to encase the selvage edge into the waistband itself just to get a nicer finish on the inside. But overall, 10 out of 10. I love these pants. So the next thing I made was the Zamora Skirt by Madswick Studio, and I made it in a cotton poplin from Blackbird Fabrics, which I just ordered and can add a link for. This is a white flowy skirt, and it's got a gathered section and some decorative, I'm going to call them pleats. It was great for a beginner. It's got an elastic waistband. What else can I say about this? I made the size B for this section and this section, but cut out a size A in this section. I could just tell looking at the pattern pieces that there was like a ton of volume in this section, and I was okay with a little less volume. So I just decided to do it that way. And the pattern is also drafted for someone who's 5'6", so I did add 4 inches of length. I added 1 inch to this section, 1 inch to this section, and 2 inches down here. And when I was making the skirt, I actually didn't put this last tier or this last fold into the skirt until after I made it and tried it on, because I was worried it was going to be too short. And this is actually like 3 inches of fabric here. But it actually could have worked either way. It ended up being kind of more ankle length without the pleat, but I decided to add the pleat. It's got a pretty generous hem on it too. But overall, it's really cute. I haven't worn it yet. It, to me, just reads like very summery, and we're not getting the nicest weather or the warmest weather right now. So I think it will be great when we get our really hot summer days, but I haven't worn it yet. I've tried styling it a couple times and I'm excited about it, but can't really comment on how it fits into outfits or my wardrobe just yet. And I also purchased fabric to make, I believe it's called the Clo Bias skirt. I purchased the everyday linen from Blackbird Fabrics, and it was also just going to be a white skirt but a different style, and that is still on my potential projects ideas, but that was another option for the white summer skirt. And the last thing I sewed was the Madeline tee from Madswick. So I'm wearing that now, and it's just like an easy to wear, boxy, high neck tee. I made the size B, and it's a white bamboo spandex blend from my stash that I purchased from Blackbird Fabrics. I've worn it a bunch already. It fits really easily into my wardrobe. And I personally find this bright stark white is like a little bit harsh on my complexion, just being so fair. So I did think about options to actually soften the material. So I tried dyeing a few scraps, which on their own don't seem that dramatic, but when sort of up against the white fabric, the original, you can see the difference. So this is just like a pale yellow. I used pomegranate rind powder to dye this, and I've already run them through my washer and dryer, so I suspect this would be like the final color. So there's a pale yellow option, but there's also this pinky peachy orangey color that I made using clay. I took some Plainsman coffee clay and just really watered it down so it was really watery, and just stuck this in there for a few hours. And I really wasn't sure what I would get. I suspect there's iron and possibly some other minerals in that clay that are creating the color. So, I mean, I think there's always space for a white t-shirt in a wardrobe, so I don't know that I'll dye this one, but I do have enough fabric to make another one of these t-shirts. And these are some possibilities on how I could soften the color of the fabric just to make myself feel a little bit more comfortable in it. And I think that's all the sewing updates I have. So I'm gonna move on to just a segment that I'm calling the big picture. So the overall goal of this project was to make a comfortable, timeless wardrobe that fits how I actually live my life. So far for knitting, I've done the Camisole number 10, the Olga sweater, and I've started a pair of socks. For sewing, I've done the Maidline tee, the Zamora skirt, and the Lane pants. And my ideas for the coming weeks include possibly the second white skirt, so in the linen. So that's I believe it's the Clo bias skirt, but I'll definitely put the name on the screen. And that's using the everyday linen from Blackbird fabrics in white. So I've already pre-washed and pre-dried that. And yeah, it's a bias skirt. It has a different look than the Zamora skirt. I'll definitely put a picture on the screen. So that's one idea or project that I have sort of in the works. And I definitely want to make another pair of the Lane pants, and I'm thinking I want to use that same everyday linen. I'm not sure what color, but I feel like that fabric is just slightly more structured than the ones I've already made. I really like the ones I've already made, but they read really casual, and although these new ones would also read casual, I think it's just slightly different and a little bit crisper in a different linen fabric. I thought about making them in the white, but I'm unsure about the pockets and if they would show through to the front of the fabric too much. And I'd also like to make a shirred dress. I've seen a lot of these kind of in my algorithm for the last little while. So it's a sleeveless bodice with elastic kind of tight, and I like the idea that it's something that could be worn to a more fancy event. Not that I go to many, but it could be with a nice strappy sandal and some nice jewelry. But I also think with like a pair of Birkenstocks and a sun hat, I could wear that to the farmer's market or just on really hot days. So the fabric that I got is this cotton poplin, so the same as what the Zamora skirt's made out of. It's called Deep Mauve. It's 100% cotton. It's from Blackbird Fabrics. It's like this muted maroony brown color that I really like. Also thought it just looked really pretty with this. So if I made a dress and could put a sweater over top, would be kind of fun. So that's one idea I have for this, and I'll definitely put up some inspiration photos. I've seen people do it with the elasticated thread that they put on their bobbin, but I've also seen people just sew channels into the fabric and put maybe 1/4 inch elastic in there. And I'm sort of leaning towards the look of that better. It looks just like, I'm not sure. It looks maybe a little bit more finished in my opinion, but yeah, so that's one upcoming project. I definitely think I'd like to make a few more t-shirts. So I've got another white Maidline t-shirt in the works, and I'm also doing another one in this, I've already cut them out, in this, it's the same fabric, I believe. So it's like a cotton modal bamboo spandex mix from Blackbird Fabric. I've had these in my stash for quite some time, and it's a gray and a white stripe. So definitely 2 Maidline t-shirts, but I'd also like to look into a few other t-shirt patterns sewing wise. If anybody has any ideas, feel free to leave a comment. Just looking for some like real classic basic workhorse style t-shirts to add to my summer wardrobe. And I did not get to the bag that I talked about in my last video, so I'm still thinking about that. I had remembered that I made this little linen bag earlier this year just for fun one day when I felt like I was really needing a break from some other things I was working on. And I really like the shape of it. I mean, it's perfect for just like a phone, lip tap, a key, basically just the little essentials that I carry. I think if I were to change this bag, I'd somehow add a little bit more structure to it. I did not use a pattern and I totally just winged it. So I can't really provide any details on how it was made because I don't remember that well, but I know I definitely did create these strips of fabric, which are sewn, and sewed them all together. And then I created a woven service and I sewed that to a background. And then I basically sewed on the back panel and put a handle on it. So that's cute and it's on my mind. There's a couple kind of like Claire V purses that I've always liked that are this size. And I don't know, perhaps I would order one of them because I think a bag is a nice way that you can bring in different textures, whether that's like leather or some sort of other woven material, but I still want to make one. So whether I make the bestie bag or something like this, it'll definitely be a crossbody, but that is on my list. I think I would like to make one that's more neutral. So most of my bags are either like a punchy color or they're black, and I think I just want like a nice classic kind of cream colored bag. I like the 9-ounce bull denim from Blackbird Fabrics. I've made a few pairs of pants in that and it washes up like so soft and relaxed and nice, so that's an option. And lastly, I have this denim that was in my stash. It's 8-ounce denim. It's from Blackbird Fabrics. They call it indigo. I was thinking about trying to make like a layering piece out of this, so like a work jacket or even some sort of wrap top. I cannot remember the name of the pattern, but I will put it up on the screen. There's this lovely kind of like oversized wrap top that I've seen on my feed lately, and I think this could be interesting for that. I think I'll probably make that pattern eventually, whether I make it out of this or not, but I don't know. Now I'm even thinking like even a lane pant for the fall could be nice out of these. So that's just another item from my stash that I felt inspired by. And the other sort of creative thing I have is just my sewing room. It's upstairs in my house and we live the majority of our time on the main floor. And I think that if I had it on the main floor, kind of getting back to that balance point where, you know, maybe you're setting a timer for shorter periods of time, I think if my sewing room was like a little bit more accessible and more sort of like in my face, I would pop in there and sew a little bit more. So we do have an extra bedroom on the main floor that I could put this sewing room in, and I'm thinking about trying that. But I'm also feeling a little bit like I don't have the best like storage solutions for my fabric, my yarn, and my notions. My notions are just like in totes and the threads are all tangled and there's buttons and there's elastic and it just feels a bit chaotic. And my fabrics are sort of in a variety of different places. I'd like to destash and I'd like to kind of get something a little bit more refined for storing fabrics. And the yarn is probably the biggest issue because it's just sort of heaped in different places around the house, which we have our windows open a lot. We don't have screens, so we do get like little moths coming in. And I think having a better storage solution for that, whether it's like a cedar trunk or something, would be better. And I am interested in buying used furniture off Marketplace or checking out like any of the antique stores on Vancouver Island just to find maybe even a dresser that I could store materials and notions in. But I'd like to get something with some character, something antique and solid wood, just to make my sewing room feel a little bit more to like my taste. Currently I have just some old IKEA furniture in there, which is fine. But if anybody has any tips or ideas on how they store their fabric, yarn, or notions, I would love to hear if you feel like commenting. And also if you, whether or not you would be interested in seeing kind of like a video about a sewing room makeover. I do think it's like an ongoing project that perhaps I could share as like a little bit of this video, or whether or not I make a separate video for it, but just gauging your interest in seeing sort of other projects like that, possibly things around my house. So I'd like to wrap up now just by saying thank you again if you've watched my videos or if you've engaged, whether you've liked them or left a comment. I was joking with a friend just saying like that I've just tapped into like this kind little corner of the internet where people are saying such nice things and they're supporting each other, and it's just really nice, and I haven't really experienced that before posting online. So thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed, and I've had fun, and I look forward to sharing again. Take care.